The College Football Playoff Committee has once again put themselves in prime position to make everybody ticked at them, to get every fan base riled up. Reagan, it's it's a mess what's going on there. It's a spectacle. They go in there, they make it look like they're gonna debate points and whatnot, and then they put in their data points that seemingly mimic what the AP and the BCS would spit out, and they throw us this absolute mess of rankings. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, so just for everybody that's listening, this is Monday night, 10 o'clock. We don't have fresh rankings. So, what Laner and I are going to talk about is largely going to be what we perceive to be the rankings based on the AP. Because, again, the AP tends to try and mimic the playoff rankings this late in the year. So, right now, I think that there's four teams that have pretty well punched their tickets in: Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, and Georgia. I think any of those four teams could drop this weekend, and I still think that you can go ahead and punch them in at, again, varying levels in the playoffs in that 12 team. But really starting with Oregon down, you know, Mississippi, Mississippi State, Ole Miss. If Ole Miss
Huge one.
loses, and if Lane Kiffin hops to LSU or Florida or wherever, man, I wouldn't put it past this committee to just make something up on the fly circa 2023 to justify they want to put in something that would be better. I think that the committee is looking for a reason to put a Miami in to justify Notre Dame being so far ahead of them. So I wouldn't put it past them to really just drop Ole Miss because if they're potentially coachless.
Yeah, I agree. And Reagan, I would say, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I think Oregon and Ole Miss are in a similar boat here. Neither of them have a phenomenal strength of schedule. They've both made off on the better end of the Big Ten and SEC scheduling, I would say. And, Oregon just had their biggest win to date last week. They have a big one against Washington this week, but I think both those teams are in must win mode. I think the committee would like Oregon more than Ole Miss. I've seen them favor Big Ten teams over SEC, in my opinion, so far this year. Um, but yeah, I think that Oregon and Ole Miss late in the year, the fifth and sixth ranked teams in the country are still in must win mode.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Oregon would probably be if say both were to drop their games, I think that Oregon would probably still fall less, even again, quality losses. Washington is a better loss than Mississippi State in the committee's
Sure,
eyes. And
sure.
so that's another data point for them. Teams, I really feel like there's a hard line right now between 13 and 14 between Miami and Utah in the AP, where I think that Utah is very much on the outside looking in.
Yep.
Whereas I think Miami has an opportunity, especially with a game against Pitt. I think Vanderbilt sitting there ahead of Miami again in the AP this week. I think that if an Alabama were to drop or a Oklahoma were to drop a game against LSU or something like that, I think that those teams can find their way in.
Yep.
I think this is going to be an interesting game weekend where you're going to see teams again, they're going to start trying to run it up. It's not just about winning anymore. It's about data points. It's about eye test. It's about those kinds of things. Common opponents. Miami against Pitt. That's a common opponent with Notre Dame playing Pitt a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. Pittman with a crazy end of the year playing Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, and Miami just could wreak absolute havoc on this
Yeah.
playoff ranking. It's pretty
Yeah. And
wild.
so I was watching the Miami Virginia Tech game this past weekend, and Miami was up 17. Virginia
Hmm.
Tech gets it down to 10. Miami gets the ball back super late, and Miami had the opportunity to really just end the game, cordially walk off, shake hands. At the end of the game, Miami was still slinging the ball, trying to
Yeah.
score to get that extra. Every extra point counts at this point in the year to the committee. Clearly to them, there would be a difference between a 10-point win and a 17-point win, even though if you actually watch the game, there's no actual difference between that
Right.
10 and 17-point win. The game was over. Miami could have thrown a pick six there at the end, and it still was over.
Right.
So,
That's a
very
great point,
interesting.
Reagan. I'm glad you said that. I
Yeah.
think I don't want to jump the gun, but I want to bring up a chaos scenario if you're good with that.
Yeah, please.
Vanderbilt wins, Miami wins, Utah wins, Alabama wins, Notre Dame wins, Oklahoma wins, Oregon and Ole Miss lose. We're looking at a log jam of two lost teams.
Hmm.
And let's just throw a Michigan win in there as well. What in the world is the committee going to do?
So if Michigan wins this game against Ohio State, I think that Michigan's in regardless of Big Ten championship.
Mm,
So there's a couple scenarios, and I believe there's a tiebreaker out there where Michigan can beat Ohio State, only have one conference loss, and still not make the Big Ten championship, I believe.
wow.
But yeah, I was on Twitter earlier looking at all the different scenarios. I believe that there is a tiebreaker out there where they lose strength of record,
Mm,
or something like that. So let's just assume Michigan, if they were to win, would be in the Big Ten championship game. They're going to jump and they're going to stay in. I
yeah.
do believe that, regardless of that Indiana, most likely the Indiana game that they would have to play in the Big Ten championship. I feel like they would be in, and that would really probably box, and that would probably end up boxing out Vanderbilt. I think, again, I think what's going to happen, again, we need to see how it plays out. Do you think that Miami beats Pitt like 14 and Vanderbilt beats Tennessee by a field goal? Even though, again, I think that Tennessee's a much better team than Pitt.
Yeah. I think the committee's in trouble with Miami. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know if I'd be able to stomach Notre Dame making it in, Miami not. I know that neither of them would be playing conference championship weekend, but man, they really have created a sizable gap for this terrible quad ranking system that they use, to where for those of you who don't know and didn't listen to Josh Pate or Heather Dinich or whoever explained it, but basically the committee will put three or four teams in a pod up there on a board, and they're already predetermined to be 1 through 4, but they go through and determine where they land in that 1 through 4. Miami and Notre Dame haven't been in the same pod to this point. They've made it clear that if they're in the same pod, then head to head would become a factor, but there's a lot that has to happen. Reagan, any thoughts on Big 12 championship game loser, especially if it's Texas Tech? Texas Tech last week was ranked fifth in the CFP. The AP right now has them at seventh. We'll see where they fall this week, but man, if Texas Tech goes into the Big 12 championship as a one-loss team and they lose, do you think that they fall out of the playoff?
No, I really don't believe. I'm going to believe this until I'm proven wrong. I believe, especially in the SEC, the Big Ten, and right now the Big 12 is having a very good year
Yeah.
where the committee is not going to. And look at the data point of last year with the ACC championship with Clemson and SMU.
Yep.
SMU was, excuse me, SMU was in the top 12 in the format, whatever.
Right.
They lost. They didn't drop out to a comparable Alabama, one additional loss, but they didn't drop out. I believe because Texas Tech, let's assume they win this weekend, they're a one loss regular season team. I don't believe that they're going to drop them out of the top 12, 11, whatever. They're not going to drop them out of the playoffs. I don't
Mm,
believe that because there's such an emphasis on the importance of these conference championships maintaining themselves. And you completely negate the entire reason for it existing if a team that is in the top 12 drops out by playing. Now, again, if Texas Tech gets boat raced, circa 2013 Ohio State versus Wisconsin,
yeah.
2013,
Yes.
2014, whenever it was, where Ohio State was out and then they boat raced Wisconsin by 52 points. Sure. But let's say it's under a two touchdown loss.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll drop them out.
I even think that's a great pull, Reagan. A great pull on that Ohio State Wisconsin game, the first year of the four-team era. I even think last year, the way the ACC championship game started versus the way it ended played a huge role in SMU staying in there. They went down big time at half, but they battled back in that second half, had a chance, forced Clemson to take a very long game-winning field goal, that even could have, missed. So I think that played a big factor. Great call on that. Of like, there's still games to be played. We could see a crazy score that we don't expect. Man, there's a big mess here. Like I really thought earlier this year we'd see a little bit more carnage and we might see a couple three-loss teams in this. It seems like that's pretty much out of the equation at this point.
Yeah, and again, again, full disclosure, you guys know if you've been listening, I'm not the biggest Texas fan. I've called them on a couple upset picks this year. I think that Texas right now is looking at this like, why did we ever schedule Ohio State?
100%.
Because if they hadn't, if they had scheduled Mercer or somebody else, they'd be sitting there. Look, let's assume they beat Texas A&M. It's a huge assumption.
Sure. Yeah, that's a huge
Huge
if.
assumption. But if they were to beat Texas A&M, they'd be sitting there. Why are we going to go schedule Ohio State? We'd be 10-2 right now. This committee, you know,
Reagan,
what's the point?
it gets worse too when you look at that Vanderbilt team right now in the AP sitting at 12. So slightly on the outside in, but very much able to get in there. And when I talk about slightly on the outside in, you're like, wait, Josh, they're at 12. You really have to be at 10, which again, I have beef with. I don't understand why we're going to, throw the top 10 in there, but then 11 and 12 get booted for potentially 18th ranked ACC champ and a potentially unranked or 25th ranked G5 champ. That's ridiculous in my mind. But Vanderbilt is on the cusp of getting into this playoff, and they have an opportunity for a resume boosting win at Neyland. They still have to take care of business. So this is all hypothetical. But head to head, Texas beat Vanderbilt, Reagan. And if you, like you said, take away that Ohio State game, they're both two lost teams. So the committee told us all offseason, we're not going to punish you if you schedule these difficult non conference matchups. And that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. And again, I think that
There's more
Texas
to the
kind
story, too.
of course, because if Texas would have lost really close to Georgia, I do think that they'd be up a good bit. But the fourth quarter, when Georgia really pulled away and just really owned that game, I think that that did a lot of damage to that argument. Where if that would have been a 7 to 10 point game where Georgia was just a little bit better and executed a little bit better, there would be a lot. Especially from the SEC office, from Greg Sankey's office, there'd be so much pressure. Like, are you kidding me? You're going to leave
Yeah,
them out? But kind of getting boat raced by Georgia sort of eliminated that argument a little bit in my mind. But
absolutely.
no, it's
They had some
crazy.
close wins, too.
Look, if
Texas
you
hasn't blown anybody out of the
no,
water,
not at all.
eye
If
test
you
wise.
if you love carnage, if you love chaos, you're a Michigan fan this weekend.
Yes.
If you love chaos, you are rooting against Texas Tech because I don't believe they're going to drop out of the Big 12 championship if they lose that Big 12 championship game. You want Miami you'd be a fan of BYU dropping or Vanderbilt dropping and seeing what happens with the committee. Would they potentially drop Notre Dame from 9 to 10 if Miami has the claim to get into that pod? Because you can almost see sort of where they're potting these teams right now in my
Yeah.
mind. I think that they're
Yes.
potting one through three together, the undefeateds. I think that then they're potting the one loss Georgia, Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas Tech. They're potting
Yep.
those teams together. And then you go to the two loss teams and plus BYU. You've really got Notre Dame, Alabama, BYU. I think that they're potting those teams together. And then really, I feel like Vanderbilt, and you could even make the argument that BYU might even be out of that pod. And then they're kind of the head of that
Yeah.
BYU, Vanderbilt, Miami, Utah pod, where they have that head to head over Utah. So,
I agree.
if Miami can find a way to get close enough and it still doesn't matter, then this committee has completely nullified the reason to play big games.
100%. I also want to bring up Michigan as well because I talked about Texas and I want to bring up a similar point for Michigan. And I have a lot of questions about where they're slotted. I think it's atrocious. And this is the AP. Again, we'll see what the CFP does tomorrow. But I think it's a little bit atrocious that Michigan is below Utah. Um, I also think you could make the case that Michigan should be above a lot of those two loss teams. Even, maybe a Notre Dame, maybe a Miami, maybe even a Vanderbilt. Like if I take my glasses off for a second and I look at this, I'm going, "Whoa, is that right?" Let me put my glasses on. Hang on, we have Michigan at 15. Um, Michigan, let's say that and I bring that all up because they have one non-conference loss at Oklahoma week 2 when Mateer was buzzing, when Oklahoma looked like a different team. And so you can talk about Oklahoma then, but also right now, Oklahoma's the eighth ranked team in the country. Definitive top 10, coming off one of the biggest wins of the year at Bryant Denny Stadium over Alabama. Michigan could beat Ohio State and, barring the tiebreak, play in the Big Ten championship game and lose in the Big Ten championship game. I personally would put Michigan in the field as a three-loss team, being that they beat Ohio State, only team in the country to do that. They played in the Big Ten championship and lost, and their other loss was a non-conference road game in Oklahoma. I would be ticked, objectively, if Michigan didn't make the field.
Yeah, if you want to see that first three loss team get into the playoffs, it would be Michigan in that scenario because they would. So I believe the winner of the SEC and Big Ten championship games will find their way into that top four, even
Mhm.
if it was Michigan. They will put that level of emphasis.
Wow,
Oh,
really?
I absolutely believe that. Because if you don't put a premium on those games, there's no reason for them to exist. There's way too much money in these games to be played. And if you're sitting there as Michigan, they're
Yeah,
definitely not dropping out.
yeah.
If they play in the conference championship, they are a lock. I would be
Also,
I would be astonished. I would be furious. You will find no bigger Michigan haters than the two guys on this pod.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Not Michigan fans going back to the cheating stuff.
Right.
But if they make it to their conference championship game, lose to Indiana and drop out, then why even play the game?
I agree completely, 100% Reagan. And at first I'm like going, whoa, because I'm looking at Michigan being at 15 right now and going, how do they catapult into the top four? Well, there would be a catapult between the 15 to the top four when if they beat Ohio State, they would have a significant jump, maybe be the highest ranked two-loss team, or at
They would.
least at
They
least in the
would.
top 10. And then you win the Big Ten championship, there would be another jump as well.
That's right.
Do you think the same would be true of Alabama? Right now, sitting at number 10 in the
Yes.
AP, they don't get a huge win against the number one team in the country. They're beating a below 500 Auburn in this case. So, do they really even move up? Could they jump from 10 to the top four by winning the SC championship game?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
I don't believe excuse me. I don't believe that they'll get too much of a boost from winning this weekend. They might be, and maybe this is the committee's plan to try and right the wrong of the Miami Notre Dame debacle, because right now they've had Notre Dame split by Bama. Maybe they
Yeah.
put Bama up above because Auburn's a little bit better of a game. Who does Notre Dame play this weekend again? Remind me.
Notre
They've
Dame this
got
weekend.
Stanford,
Stanford.
the mighty Stanford Cardinal, 4-7. So there is a chance that if Bama were to win, especially if they won by a touchdown or more, I could see them flipping and sort of getting back in front of Notre Dame. They're not going to jump Oklahoma, obviously. There's a buffer there, but I could
Oh,
see them
yeah.
flip-flopping with Notre Dame and then Miami Notre Dame getting that much closer to those pods being considered. If they're sitting there, if Alabama's sitting there at number 9 after Auburn, let's say there's not carnage in front of them. Again, we don't know this. If they play A&M or Georgia and they win, they're going to jump that team just by virtue of them playing again and winning. But they will find their way into the top four. I
Mm.
don't believe that there will be an at-large SEC team without in the top four without the conference champion being up there in front of them.
Yeah. Which is seemingly not going to happen because Ohio State and Indiana are locking down two of those four spots. Would you say the same about Alabama? Three-loss team played in the SEC championship. They'd still be in, just like Michigan.
Hmm. Can you can you re-ask that?
So
My
So
headphones went out a little
Alabama
bit. I'm sorry.
Alabama beats Auburn. They play in the SEC championship. They go into that weekend 10-2. If
Hmm.
they drop the SEC championship,
They're
let's
in.
say to an undefeated A&M, they're still in.
They're in. I don't
So we
believe
feel the same
that
way
those.
about
Yeah,
Michigan and Alabama right now. They're in the exact same
100%.
spot.
Yeah,
Must
both.
win this weekend rivalry. Got go to the SEC championship game or the Big Ten championship game, and even if you lose, you're in. We're
Yeah,
both aligned on that. Yeah,
yeah.
I
No, I
agree.
think that that's how it is going to be. I think there's way too much money in these conference championship games for anybody to give up on them. And if you don't put a premium on the game being played, then what's the point?
Yeah. And I think even outside of the money, just a lot of fans can see the like flawed thinking of, oh, we forced you to play an extra game and then you lost, especially in the Big Ten and the SEC. That's why I asked about the Big 12 too with Texas Tech, because to me, of the ACC and the Big 12, which I would lean a little bit more towards we're in the Power 2 era than the Power 4 era, but I know that's still the terminology we use. Texas Tech has separated themselves. Um, but man, outside
I
of that, I don't know.
Yeah, I believe that they took the correct philosophy last year of if a team is in at the regular end of the regular season, they shouldn't be punished for an extra data point when every other team is sitting at home to jump them. Now, again, if if it's a boat racing, if it's a really rotten data point, then maybe,
Yeah.
maybe. but not for the big two. Even if it was a boat racing, I don't believe that they would allow that to happen where they would
Yeah.
drop them out. But if they're on the outside looking in, like the ACC champion this year, then that's definitely a potential where they could drop out or they would
Re-
fall out if they're already out.
yeah. Reagan, I'm going to throw a curveball at you. So BYU, all right? BYU, as they presently sit in the AP right now, they're 11th. Last week, the CFP had them at 11. So there's a chunk of two lost teams that are ahead of BYU. BYU, some people I've seen have argued before this weekend, right? So before Oregon got the USC win, had a better resume than Oregon, you could say, when you look at a lot of what the committee talks about quality losses, quality wins, strength of schedule, all that kind of stuff. Do you have any issue with where BYU sits right now?
I don't have an issue with it. Would have an issue with it if it becomes a problem where if they go play Texas Tech and they lose and then they fall out. That's when I would have a problem with it. Right now, they've got everything in front of them. They win, they're going to find their way in. If they beat, who do they play this weekend, real
They've got
quick?
UCF, which is
They've
weird.
got
This is
UCF.
not a traditional rivalry. This is
That's right.
a negative of conference expansion here. We highlighted some of
So
the positives, but
yeah, of course. And so if they are in, I think that they should stay in.
yeah,
They're kind of that cutoff team right now where
yeah.
they're sitting there. If they win and they handle their business, they're going to find their way in. Um, you know,
These rankings are
BYU
huge for BYU, man.
huge.
Huge. Tomorrow night's
BYU
rankings.
BYU reminds me a lot of Penn State under James Franklin pre this year, where they are they're the most consistent team. I love betting on them to when they're playing teams that are below them that they should beat. And then I also like on the other side when they're playing a big game against Texas Tech or some of the other guys in the Big 12 where they're not favored.
Yeah.
They just sit right there at the top of they beat the guys that they're supposed to. They don't beat the teams that they're not supposed to. It's very James Franklin Penn State-esque.
Dude, that's a great pull. Coach Sitake's done a great job there, man.
Oh yeah.
BYU, in the Big 12, they were independent for a while. He's got a good record there, 72 and
Yeah.
43 as the head coach there. BYU might be like one of the most crucial spots where the CFP kind of indicates, hey, BYU, you control your own destiny or you don't, right? So it's very interesting, man,
Yeah.
because BYU has a couple big wins this year, but they're all Big 12 opponents, right? So like their non-conference P4 matchup was Stanford. That I don't give you much there. Hey, I'm glad you scheduled it. It's great. I'm grateful for that. But they did have a big win over Arizona. They had the huge one over Utah at home. And as of late, man, um, they got TCU. They went on the road and beat Cincinnati. Cincinnati was top 25 at the time. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to be in the top 10 right now where you're really feeling really fine about where you're sitting. And there's not a worse place to be than that 11-12 spot right now where because of the bad formatting where there's going to be a
Right.
G5 rep, there's going to be a mid CC rep. Shout out
Yep.
Howie.
Yeah. How we coined that one. Yeah. It's such a good call, Reagan. Maybe we close here. If you have any other thoughts, great. But you look at BYU and Vanderbilt right now, it would be a shame if those two teams, if the season finished where it is right now, and they're being ranked 11th and 12th, and all of a sudden we'd slot 17 Virginia up there ahead of them. Um,
Or 20 James Madison.
yeah, that doesn't sit well with me, man. I think that I don't think BYU or Vandy could put together 4 wins to win a national championship, but I do think they could put together one or two upsets with
Oh
anybody
yeah.
in the field. I don't think
Whereas,
I don't think that's the case with Virginia and JMU. I just don't.
yeah, if the entire point is to put the best teams in, that's the entire point of a playoff is not a handout.
Yep.
It's not supposed to be a handout. If you play and you win and you're good enough, you're in. Nobody complained about Boise making the playoffs last year. Boise
Right.
was a
They
darn good
earned it.
team last year. That's right. They were good. And this year, there's not a representative from the G5 that's good enough that should be in.
That's right. That's right. Well, Reagan, think we end there. Any other final thoughts?
I can't wait. I can't wait for this weekend, man.
Oh, it's going to be a blast. Everybody enjoy Rivalry Week. Hey, we might as well give a shout out to the hats. duckbuckco.com. Reagan and I both rocking them. You got the bigger duck buck there with the green lid. We both got the rope hats. I got a little cream and like off-color black here. But man, use code LCFP for 15% off. I'm sure they're doing a bunch of Black Friday sales and all that too right now, so wouldn't be a bad time to take an additional 15% off with code LCFP at duckbuckco.com. Reagan, always a pleasure. Thank you to everybody watching in. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and share this with a friend.